Well, thank you for the invitation. The danger of going second is when you prepare, you have no idea what number one is going to say. Thank you, Dr. Anwar. Remember that the next time. It's an interesting issue. Michael raised a couple of things about the fact there are no euros out there, and there are not. Let me put that in a little bit of context. They will arrive January 1, 2002. It must be done by July 1, 2002. It can be done quicker. That is, the physical, actual denomination, bills and coins will be there at that point. Up until that point, you can use your own. When you make a deposit in the bank, you do credit card, they are converted from yours to euros and from euros back to whatever you want to be. It really isn't as awkward as it sounds. To put the reason for the delay, number one, is to get people used to the idea. Number two, let me put it in a little bit of context. There are 12 billion copies of paper money to be produced. There are 50 billion coins to be produced. Then you've got to get that distributed. Now think about the logistical problems in 11 countries of putting in a brand new currency that doesn't disappear. Now if you had any kind of felonious instincts, that's got to be a wonderful time to start thinking about theft. Both directions. As the banks soak up the domestic currencies, you've got to store all of that until you can get it to a central bank to be destroyed, melted, whatever you do to make it go away. So there are some logistical issues here as to why we could not issue them July of '99. So part of it is pure logistics. The other issues that one needs to address, the pro side of this. One of the issues, as Michael referred to, the capital markets throughout Europe are extremely thin. They just bear no resemblance at all to U.S. markets. For example, stock market capitalization in 11 members of Euroland is roughly 40% of GDP. In the U.S., it's 140%. They just do not have access to capital. Venture capital is very difficult. Other than straight bank loans, it's very hard to get started in business. Let me kind of put that in a context. I had the opportunity a year ago, last fall. I taught in Germany at the school, very high-level MBA program, WHU in Koblenz, Germany. These students are top of the line, 750 GMAT. To graduate, you must go to school in 3 countries, in 3 languages, to get your MBA. These people ought to be the greatest internationalists that have ever gone to school. They speak, read, and write 3 languages. They've been educated in 3 countries, top of the line. Not a one of them had any comprehension of my focus on entrepreneurship. When you raise the issue, it's, I can't. It's, what do you mean you can't? I'll never get the financing, and I'll never get the permit. I don't come from the right social structure. It's very hard to change that to say, okay, now you have a new currency, let's issue venture capital. Because these are young people. If anybody was ever going to take a risk, that's the time. They've got the training, they've got the age, they know the opportunities are out there. Most of them had come to the U.S. for 1 semester. They've seen what goes on in our capital markets. You say, well, why don't you just do this? Oh, I can't. That's not the way it's done. That's not possible. What is happening, for example, you refer to the fact there's a little bit of a controversy between the German Minister of Finance and the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank is meeting today in Frankfurt, Germany. They have been pressured to lower interest rates. The response has been, the governor of the European Central Bank, the response has been, you need to fix your labor policies. Right now you've got way too many days off, you've got way too many benefits, you get that repaired and your economy will turn around and start back up. Well, the response is, well, if you would just reduce interest rates, we would have the means to do that. This controversy is almost inevitable when you think about the nature of this new currency. It is the first currency that we have ever had experience with. There is no monetization by scarce resources, gold, silver. It's not backed by anything. Well, we all kind of got used to that by 1973 with Bretton Woods. We kind of finally learned to live without the gold standard. This is also the first one not backed by a sovereign government. That we don't have any experience with. There's nobody's picture on that currently. There are 11 governments who say, I agree to issue this, but it's not mine. Now think about the situation that those countries are in. You are responsible for your economy, but you don't have control over the currency. Right? Conceptually, it works. Practically, there's a lot of problems there. You can't go to your own central bank and say, I will do these policies structurally. If you will do this monetarily, so that my governmental fiscal policies, your monetary policies, will work our way out of this problem. Now you only have half of the mechanism. You've got what you can do. They're doing what they do. They have committed themselves, and I suspect, given the structure of it and the strong influence of Germany and Euroland, they will fulfill it. It is a 2% per year inflation rate. They're going to control the issuance of money to control the inflation throughout the 11 members, and in effect, all 15. Right? The ones who did not opt in are largely going to peg to it anyway. So it's really the 15 countries in the old European Monetary Union. They're going to hold to a 2% inflation. That is going to get very painful. In Germany, you're running between 10.5% to 11% unemployment average. In the former East Germany, it runs close to 20%. Now that's a very difficult challenge to maintain political stability when you have young people with no jobs and your currency or your economy can only inflate at 2%. So these people have backed themselves into a very challenging position. And it sounds like we're negative, and I think it sounds somewhat, Michael gave the same impression, we're always focusing on these problems. There are some positives out of this. Let me talk about that. One is to widen and deepen this capital market, to let these young people that I taught actually visualize you could get financing to start a business. That's feasible, because now they don't conceptualize it. If you were not born to the money, you're going to just get a good job. I had students who were graduating, and I said, well, what kind of a firm? You know, young entrepreneurial, SAP, one of the major software manufacturers is there in Germany. Is that what you're looking for? No, I want one of the old line firms so I can get the benefit. When you have that mental structure, and then we're talking about opening a market, you're asking for a huge social change in very short time. I think a lot of these benefits that have been touted for the euro will come true. But if I were you, I wouldn't look for them in a 1 to 2 year time horizon. I'd put my short-term time horizon as 5 years out, my intermediate as 10, because it is just going to take time to work this through the system, to where people understand not only can you compare prices across 11 countries, you can also compare your source of supply, which means there's going to be some layoffs. There's going to be some companies that fail. That's a resounding shock to a system that has never had that before. If you had an industry in trouble, you just put together a helping package as the government, and you kind of got them through it. Now what we're saying is, you got 2% inflation, you don't control the currency. I guess if they failed, they failed. That's a major social change. It's a different way of looking at things. I don't know that it's better. You have to recognize that a lot of times when we interpret what is happening, we see it from the perspective of the U.S. We're used to this, folks. I mean, to some extent, Panhandle's a little bit out of set with it, but it has somewhat the same reality. Most people do not anticipate living, working, and raising their family where they were raised. Our students coming through, the first thing you tell them is, you probably are going to be in Dallas, Denver, Oklahoma City. That's where you're going to get your job. That has never happened in Europe. That has never been a way of life. To suddenly say, okay, we signed the Maastricht Treaty, that came out of the Treaty of Rome in 1957, we've been thinking about it for 40 years, so okay, do that. That's a family structure, social structure, community structure that has got to be modified. It will look eventually more like the U.S. Is that better? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. You know, a lot of us are not having that much fun working 60, 70 hours a week and feeling like we're not doing that much. Like, well, why didn't you do anything significant? Well, because I wore out somewhere in there. But my secretary at WHU gets 23 days vacation a year in Germany, plus vacation. That's 23 holidays. If she's working full-time, she works 10 months. That's almost as good as being an academic. Except they get paid. You know, I get 3 months off. I just have to do without money. It's not a problem. You know, you're employed in September, you quit working in May, and then you just go hungry for 3 months. But these are major structural issues in those economies, and every one of them is different. France has its own unique set, as does Italy, as does Belgium. They're all unique. In time, it will work. It has to work, because we need that broad capital market in order to make these firms efficient, to gain access to low-cost capital, to let them compete globally. Otherwise, they're going to be frozen out of the global market. It has to go that way, but it's not going to go quick and easy. It can't, because you're asking not just to change a banking system or a currency, you're asking people to change. You know, and that's easy to intellectualize, it's difficult to actually execute. But the economy there is almost identical in size. One of the questions, just to precede it, Syed had down there, will it supplant the dollar as a reserve currency? It's going to compete, same size, same number of people. We're short by, I think, 20 million. It's all the difference between us and the 11th in the U.S. The economies are marginally different in terms of service and industrial capacity, but they're growing together. GDP in the U.S. is slightly higher by another euro 1.5 billion, but that's a matter of their system becoming more efficient. Effectively, they are equivalent. The two of them together are about 30% to 35% of the world GDP. Japan will run a poor third at about 8%. So you're going to have a pair of 15s and an 8, and then everybody else. So you're looking at about 40% of the world economy is going to be the Euro environment, the U.S., and Japan, those three. As time goes by, what will occur is, yes, there will be some money shifted into Europe. I don't see it as a sea change. I don't see it as completely destroying the value of the dollar, because you have to recognize, if Europe has a locked-in inflationary rate of 2%, in order to be competitive globally, what is ours? 2. We're going to look alike. We're going to track up together. We'll track down together. We don't even need to sign an agreement. Self-interest says, don't get out of line with them. They'll eat you alive in the marketplace. So we're both going to pretty much be together, which means there would be no reason for a foreign investor, other than convenience, to prefer one over the other. So I think, yes, they'll pick up some dollars as, or some euros, really, as some money moves out of dollars into another reserve position. Those are going to become companies and investors who could have done that anyway. This just is now showing up as a euro. But if that's what you wanted, you could have done it in marks, in German marks. There's no reason why not. So I don't think it's going to be a monumental change that our interest rates, like we first talked, are suddenly going to go skyrocketing up for us to hold the Japanese dollars. No. We're all going to have roughly the same interest rates, because we're going to have about the same stability in our economies, and the conversion rate, the exchange rates, are going to be pretty much what they are now. I handed around, just to kind of summarize, that little thing came out of CNN, the back 2 pages. The front page that I've got on there, those are the official exchange rates between the 11 currencies and the euro. Those were agreed on January 1, and that's locked in. In order to change that, the European Central Bank and all the other members have got to get together and agree to let you change your rate relative to that. So those 11, that's the rate they will be. And so that part has been settled in. And I thought you might find it interesting to see where they set it. But if you take today's rate of the euro vis-a-vis the dollar, roughly $1.08 to 1 euro right now, you can then compare that to like the marks. And if you look it up in the Wall Street Journal, you'll find the mark to the dollar is exactly where the computation says it should be. Right? In other words, you can't speculate On the 11 currencies against the euro, they're locked in. That's the rate any bank is going to give you when you swap marks for euros. And then go from there over to Belgian. You can't make any money going marks to Belgian franc and jump around this. They've stopped that thing. So it has already begun. It's underway. It has started. I think it's positive, but I don't think it's easy. I think you're going to see a lot of unrest. You're going to see some very unhappy citizens, and you're going to see some governments frantically trying to come up with some way to get the economic policies they need without the power to control currency. And that is not because they're unwilling to make the move. You need to understand, I don't have a textbook that says how to do this. We've not ever done it. So I can't say, do it like them. There's no them. This is new ground. And when you're in new ground, you kind of slip a little. You know, things don't go smoothly, but you'll probably get there. But they are learning as we are, as we go into it. So it's a new, fascinating development. One of the intriguing parts for all of us is being here now, getting to watch this in the news every day. You're seeing the birth of a new currency, and I don't know any other generation in recent memory, at least, who's gotten to see that happen. And not only a new currency, but a new way of separating it from sovereignty. They also refer to the UK. The standing joke, UK is now talking as if they will come into it before the coins actually come out. The standing joke is the reason they didn't join in the beginning, at that time they had Prime Minister Thatcher was in a position of influence as Prime Minister of England. The argument was that out of deference to the Queen, she would not approve any bills that did not have the Queen's likeness. So therefore, Britain didn't join, because the Euro community said, I really don't think we need the Queen of England on our currency. Apparently they've now gotten over that. The Queen has now decided there's enough pictures of her floating around, and so we don't need them on the currency. They probably will come in. Thank you.
Excellent comments. Let's open this floor for your questions. Questions from the audience? Paul?
Is there any relationship between euros and bananas, or are they separate issues?
You want me? I take bananas for breakfast, but no euros. I think the banana issue, as you bring it up, is the issue between the United States and the European Union on the preference that the European Union gives to bananas from the former French, I believe it is, colonies and Spanish colonies and what have you, rather than those bananas that come out of the Caribbean, which are, I think, part of the preferential group of countries that are tied to the United States. And the United States has taken on the European Union at the World Trade Court, I believe it is, in order to see whether or not they can get the Europeans to back down on this. The thing is, it of course is an issue over a totally trivial thing, and there are many more issues between the European Union and the United States that are much more pressing and probably should be addressed, but it's sort of like taking this side issue as standing for all the other issues. That is a fight between the two blocks. I don't think it has anything to do necessarily with the euro, though. I think it's separate from that.
The euro is just happens to be in the way right now of a discussion that would have been held anyway. This has been a long-standing disagreement, and it's just this was a good excuse to bring it out into the open.
Other questions?
What do you think will happen with mergers? Do you think you see the U.S. going in, buying European firms, or do you see European buying U.S. firms, or no effect now that they're open wide and doing the capital market?
Both directions, because the European firms, one of the things we are discovering in recent years is, contrary to some early academic research, economy of scale works. Bigger really is better, especially when you go global. There's a lot to be said for small and flexible, but there's also a lot to be said for lots of resources. and access to markets. So the Europeans are going to be expanded. They're going to be mergers. There's no reason to have 6 different separate manufacturers of the same product in 6 different European countries. One of them is going to dominate and buy up the others. That is just going to happen. Will they continue to buy U.S. firms? Certainly. One of the things about a widening, deepening capital market is that you become more transparent. Information flow becomes more necessary. One of the real blockages to getting European companies into the U.S. in terms of our capital market is our security exchange requirements are pretty severe in comparison to European requirements. Over there, you can have a major multinational firm, billions of dollars, on which there is no financial information available. It's owned by 1 or 2 major families, and it's none of your business. When you come into the U.S., it doesn't matter who owns it. You will comply with security exchange requirements and the NYSE requirements. So what's going to happen is the European capital markets will begin to adopt that same sort of approach. It'll become more transparent. That'll give them access to enough money. Yes, they'll buy a U.S. firm. We'll be buying over there. I think you'll see what we have done as a merger activity here in the U.S. is already evident over there. Daimler Chrysler is a good case in point. It's going to widen even further. I think you'll see a lot more.
Add something to this for just a moment. I think as far as the transparency of the European markets, one of the problems still is, and this is sort of my own bailiwick, is the fact that the accounting and reporting requirements in Europe still aren't up to par to those in the United States. This is going to take a while before that happens. We will eventually see, I think, Europe in that sense adapting some of the openness that you get in financial reporting on the part of the United States companies. One other thing, I think we're going to see an awful lot of mergers still by European companies buying not only in the United States but around the world. And we're going to see more European companies moving out of Europe and actually headquartering elsewhere. One of the things is an answer to Mr. LaFontaine's new package of new taxes on business in Germany. Was the 2 large German insurance companies said, if you actually go through with this, we'll just move out our headquarters and we will establish ourselves outside of Germany, take 15,000 jobs with us. So it's not just mergers within Europe, although if you take the fact that there are 3 automobile companies in Germany, 2 in Sweden, 2 in France, 1 in Spain, 1 in Italy, obviously some consolidation is going to have to take place.
Thank you for your presentations. I enjoyed it a lot. What time frame do you expect, or do you expect the capitalization relative to GDP to equalize between the U.S.? You said it was 40% of GDP in Europe and 140 here.
You need to be well into the new millennium. We'll be past solving Y2K before that. Reminds me of a joke. You know what caused the Dark Ages? Y1K. I think you're looking at least 1 to 2 decades. Because you've got to get, number one, not only companies accustomed to doing it, it's accounting standards, reporting standards, open disclosure, getting the capital market structured big enough to handle that kind of volume, and to get people accustomed to trading in and out. That is, buying stock is not a common activity throughout much of Europe. And if you buy it, you hold it. It becomes part of your family's position. You don't trade stock. So a lot of our 140% market capitalization to GDP is a bunch. We've got a lot of people who churn a lot of stocks because we're accustomed to that. I think that will take at least a decade, if not more.
One.
I'd like your comments on the political aspect of when you see more union coming about, rather than just on the monetary side.
I think we're going to see it, but it's going to be a very, very unpleasant process for the people involved in it. I think that we're going to see people like LaFontaine, like some of the other politicians, having to swallow an awful lot of pride and an awful lot of their policies, the way they are currently constituted, in order to come up with the idea and the mental idea towards an open and free society. I mean, Professor Owens was talking about the mental attitude of his students, and that is probably very basic to this entire process. Until that attitude changes, we're not going to see, I think, the kind of free and open society that is going to mesh or allow itself to be meshed, which would be a requirement, I think, for a total union. Otherwise, these controversies are going to stay there, and they're going to stay below the surface, and at any time can blow up. And probably the worst thing that could happen is a step back. It would be rather better to go slowly and get there than to go too fast, and then to have to retrench. As a matter of fact, I personally see that as the main danger to the euro, that there is a danger that if everything really goes bad, that the whole thing will fall apart. As a matter of fact, the penalties under the treaty are so bad that a country that would want to get out would, in essence, have to get out of the European Union at the same time in order to survive. It would possibly break up the entire impetus to a union, a total union in Europe. So it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take an awful lot of change in attitude, the way I see it.
This is an accounting question. The International Accounting Standards Committee they're trying to make standards for the whole world. And one of their biggest problems is the United States. Because, of course, we believe our way is right, and anytime they're not the same as us, well, what do? What effect is this going to have? I mean, are we going to have to give in a little bit and do things the way they do things over there, or what's eventually going to happen?
Do you want me to answer that?
Go ahead.
The problem is this, and that is that, and I hope none of my colleagues are listening here, that the United States profession has gone overboard with the detail of prescribed matters. And the rest of the world just doesn't want to follow that, and I can understand that. I think, on the other hand, there are some major areas where the rest of the world needs to narrow the differences and narrow the options available to companies who, in essence, state their balance sheets and their income statements the way they want, quote unquote. I think there's got to be an understanding that the U.S. has got to give on a lot of the details, but insist on the principles, and a lot of the principles of the U.S. will have to permeate the rest of the world.
So we're going to be the big bullies and still not let them into our securities markets until they do it?
I think so. We still have the biggest market, so we can probably have more leverage than they do.
How will this euro impact traders, currency traders like Soros?
He has a lot fewer targets. One of the real issues is assuming that they can keep the economy stable enough, keep the euro fairly stable, is that you cannot make a run against an economy of that size. Whereas you could against one of the individual countries in one of the 11 would be within the range of making a run on their currency. So that adds a credibility factor to the weaker members of that small, not weaker in the sense of economic structure, weaker in the sense of size. So I think it just gives him fewer targets. Of course, if you were one of the other targets, that's got to be a pause for thought. It does focus the mind wonderfully elsewhere. So I think you will continue to see those kinds of runs. But you need to understand, the government, the only reason you can do that is because the government has indicated a willingness to let itself be robbed. You cannot make money speculating on currencies unless the government is trying to hold an artificial peg, and you're just wondering how deep their pockets are before they quit. So eventually, as people become more free-floating and accept the realities of what that does to your basic economy, then those opportunities perhaps begin to decline. But you can't fault the man for taking advantage of people's ego that they're big enough to stop the market. To give it context, even leaving aside the trading of the euro right now, because there's no reason to be trading it, we're all doing it the other way. The daily trading is over $1.5 trillion foreign exchange. There is no economy that can beat that size of a market. It just is not feasible. Nobody's big enough to say, I'm going to tell you where my currency value will go. Well, you can tell me for 3 or 4 days till you go broke. real thrilled to take your money, but it just is not mechanically feasible anymore, and it took a while for some countries to figure that out. Brazil, I think, did a better job of it based on what they saw the Asian countries do than almost anybody. They just said from day one, let it flow. Well, it kind of takes the edge off of speculating against it. No way of making money.
Other questions, comments? Dr. Cooley, do you have any comments?
I'm listening.
Well, before we conclude, I want to make one apology. The sound system media sent us, it's like a karaoke sound system. It has a lot of echo, so I'm sorry it did not really work well. But before we conclude, this kind of a seminar is not just a one-person's effort. There are a lot of people who have helped me. SIFE, Students in Free Enterprise, this is one of the award-winning chapters. They helped us. Phi Beta Delta Honor Society for International Scholars, we have a chapter on campus, award-winning chapter, they helped us. Friends of the Cornette Library, this is our new sponsors, and they are here, and we thank you for their help, and they have done a wonderful work, and please become members of the Cornette Library Friends Society, they need your money. And then, of course, Dr. John Cooley for his help and support. And, of course, Michael Wout, I misspelled your name, my apologies. And I will not do it again.
Actually, my name is spelled like Route 66, except that I'm only 65. Next year I can say, like a Route 66.
Okay. And Dr. Jim Owen and of course the audience, I want you to know that 4 people came from Southwestern Oklahoma State University. They are here. Looks like Max, you have done a good job advertising in the Globe News because they read your ad in the Globe News. And then we do have one gentleman came from Lubbock, Texas Tech. So looks like we are doing something really good. But again, thank you for your support and help and attendance, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
So which one are you in?